declared. And you will also notice that despite the fact that the president of the ANC did the acceptance speech of the results, we thought that we need to create this space for the media to ask us those difficult questions that you normally have. You didn't have a chance to ask questions yesterday. The president accepted the results, and the media, I would imagine, that had those questions and final details they wanted to interrogate the ANC about. We are creating that space today. The African National Congress has been humbled by the decisive outcome of the 5th general election held on the 7th of May 2014. We celebrate the consistent support and confidence of our people have demonstrated in the ANC over a 20-year period. As we said in our 2014 election manifesto, this ANC victory is dedicated to the first president of the democratic South Africa, the icon of our struggle and the father of our nation, Isitwalandwe Siyaparangwe, Tata Comrade Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. In doing so, we recommit ourselves to building on the values and he and other leaders of our glorious organization embodied. Values of, among others, selflessness, humility, and service to our people. Since 1994, the ANC has maintained the support of more than 62% of the electorate, proving that our base is rock solid. Yes, the margins are softer and therefore need our attention. The results of our work are qualitatively and quantitatively felt and appreciated by our people over a period of time. The people of South Africa has once again given us an overwhelming mandate to continue with the work we started in 1994 under the stewardship of President Nelson Mandela, guided by the Freedom Charter, to build a free and a just society. Our mandate is to steer this nation towards its total liberation within the context of our national democratic society and the second phase of our transition. In the words of President Jacob Zuma, this victory shows that the ANC is rooted in the hearts and minds of the people of South Africa. As we approach these elections, we did so having reviewed the policy positions in the 2012 Policy Conference of the ANC and adopted by the 53rd National Conference in Mangaung, wherein the ANC committed itself to radical socio-economic transformation and accelerating the pace and change towards socio-economic freedom. We have remained steadfast to confronting the triple challenges of inequality, poverty, and unemployment. Our manifesto reflected our commitment to these objectives, which are consistent with what our people have raised during the manifesto forums and during our campaign as we interacted with them throughout the country. In other words, that commitment has been confirmed in interacting with our people. Over 11 million South Africans from all walks of life have reaffirmed the confidence in the ANC as the organization with capacity, commitment, and track record to move South Africa forward. Despite the negative campaigning from opposition parties, sections of the media, and many other forces who had an interest in the elections, South African voters resoundingly communicated a vote of no confidence against those who would seek to undermine and negate the significant strides our country has made in the last 2 decades of freedom. Voters in the so-called hotspots voted overwhelmingly for the ANC. This has sent a clear message that supports our often stated position that the genuine grievances of our people should not be used opportunistically. They must be a call for the ANC to redouble its effort to ensure quality service delivery. In other words, yes, they give us overwhelming support, but we are recommitting ourselves to pay attention to the issues raised in those areas and other areas in the country. The decisive mandate bestowed upon our movement by the electorate is a directive that we must now put our collective resolve to work to create jobs, eradicate poverty, and eliminate inequality. Guided by the People's Plan, the National Development Plan, over the next 5 years, will promote inclusive and job-creating economic growth, ensure greater access to quality health care through the rollout of national health insurance, and refocus our energies on quality education. We have committed ourselves to improve the conditions of our people living in rural areas and fast-track land redistribution and land restitution. We once again commit ourselves to continue establishing integrated human settlements, providing shelter to the most vulnerable, and continue restoring the dignity of our people. The work started in 1994 building South African nation that is cohesive and united in its diversity continues. Crime and corruption remain critical areas that require our attention as we seek to safeguard democracy and accelerate the pace of delivery to all citizens. Our profound appreciation goes to the thousands of volunteers and supporters of the ANC who work tirelessly under difficult and often thankless conditions to reach out to talk to our people from door to door, town to town, village to village, telling the good story of our 20 years of democracy. We congratulate all political parties who took part in the 2014 elections, reaffirming that our democracy is maturing, becoming a beacon of hope throughout the continent and the world. We further congratulate the many efficient men and women of the Independent Electoral Commission who once again professionally delivered a successful, peaceful, free, fair, transparent, and credible election as attested to by eminent observers representing continental, global, and global community. We regret the unfortunate and isolated incidents, the killing of our party agent in KwaDukuza, and the violence that erupted in Alexander Township. We thank our government and law enforcement agencies who work together with ANC to deliver this successful outcome. To more than 11 million South Africans who voted for the ANC, it is our assertion that your confidence in the ANC is not misplaced. The African National Congress will not disappoint the aspiration that you have called upon us to work with you to realize. We will redouble our effort to deal decisively with the challenges that you, our people, expressed to us during the campaign. That is the end of the statement. Thank you very much.
I know that I have not introduced the panel. I hope you can see the gentleman sitting on my left. His name is Malusi Gigaba. He is the head of our elections. And the gentleman who has finished the statement is the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Gwede Mantashe. We will now take your questions, if there are any. Yes, 1, 2, 3, in that order. Let's start.
Thanks. Good morning. Andrew England with the Financial Times. Going forward with the next ANC government, can you say what you're going to try and do to restore weak investor and business confidence and to get growth to the levels you need to meet your manifesto pledges of tackling poverty, inequality and unemployment? I know you're going to mention the NDP, but can you give us an idea where the priorities are and particularly what your sort of message is to the investor community that's sort of wary and cautious about whether the government can actually get to the levels of growth needed? Thanks.
Q, next.
Just speaking about the hotspots, the hotspots, the one characteristic about the hotspots, the one trends, was they were increasingly becoming no-go zones for the ANC. Obviously, it played itself out differently with regards to the elections and the numbers. But in terms of going forward with those communities, you said you're going to recommit yourselves to those communities. How so? And where do you start? Because what I've also noticed throughout campaigning is that what's called the fires is the struggle veterans, the heroes, Umama Winnie visiting areas like Bakersdale. What happens now going forward with those communities? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Situmo Business Day newspaper. The SG said the voter base of the party is still solid, but the margins are softer. Could you elaborate on that and perhaps give us specific examples of places where, you've had concerns with the margins? And also you said twice that, the ANC is looking at redoubling its efforts. In practical terms, what does that mean? Thanks.
Goed. Nabal. Gqibile ngoku. Aqeda apha. Semka. Skatel. Oh, Mzondini.
Mzwani Lembejo from SABC. SG, you said as the ANC, you look at the pressing issues. I think some of the pressing issues are pretty clear, generally. It's service delivery, and that tend to generate those protests. And I think in the past, some of the arguments you've been advancing was to say, because people have seen success elsewhere, they think it's their time to also be looked after or be taken care of. So how are you going to make sure that you satisfy everyone all at once? Because you probably will go to Bakersdale, and people there will probably be happy. But somewhere in the rural Limpopo or KZN or Eastern Cape, people will say, oh, if they protest, so they get taken care of, so we're doing the same. So how are you going to deal with those things? Because they can easily get recurring. Here in Gauteng, for example, some of the issues will be about perhaps the so-called middle class. And I think the e-tolls were hugely unpopular. Maybe that's another pressing issue, isn't it?
Okay, let's start there.
Thank you very much. Konita Hansa from the New Age newspaper. You say more than 11 million people have put their faith in the African National Congress. And the way that they... and obviously now that the ANC is the governing party and will rule South Africa for the next 5 years, just in terms of the people that will be at the helm of this power, how will the ANC as a party put those people in place? What guidelines will be used for deployment? And also, how soon will we hear those announcements? Thank you very much.
Nicholas Bauer.
Thank you, Jackson. Nicholas Bauer from ENCA. Mr. Mantashe and Mr. Gigaba, any comment on the weekend newspaper reports that you intend to hold in Indaba about your drop in support, over 3% drop in support? It's still an overwhelming majority, but it's the lowest amount of electoral support that you've received in 20 years. And then secondly, we've been through an extremely divisive election campaign. You accuse the opposition of negative campaigning, and let's be honest, you haven't exactly been friendly towards one another. How are you going to ensure as an ANC government that all political parties work towards the betterment of the country in the next 5 years? How are you going to bring them to the table, essentially?
Nicholas, let's be factual. You know that in 1994 we got 62.65. I just want us to be factual. Thank you very much. There.
Asanda Makaka, ANN7. Still on the softer margins, SG. I think from 2004 to 2014, there's been a drop of a loss of 48 seats for the ANC in Parliament. 48 seats for the ANC. And maybe related to that, but in Gauteng specifically, the ANC got 64% of the vote in 2009. And this year it's 53, if I'm correct. What do you attribute these losses to? is it a cause for concern for the ANC? And also, perhaps you can talk around the article that's in the City Press today, where certain members or officials of the ANC in Gauteng are saying that, the president's utterances may be what has cost them in the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When you refer to the City Press, you mean the ghosts that spoke there? Yes, sir. Oh, thank you.
I was talking to our sister parties who came to observe the elections beyond the institution. We had about 9 parties in the region that came and hosted by the ANC. One of the things they were actually talking to was that they liked the South African mathematics, that 62% is regarded as loss, and 20% and 5% is regarded as winning. And they say that is only a unique mathematics to South Africa. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Anything about 55% victory in elections globally is regarded as overwhelming victory. In South Africa, it is not done that way. The positive side about it is that the ANC is expected to benchmark itself against itself. That is the positive part of it. And we appreciate that as a positive spin, that we must take serious, benchmark ourselves against ourselves, work hard against our past victories and our past performance. That is what we regard as positive, but it is a distortion to regard anything over 60% as seriously worrying, as a concern, as a decline, and so forth and so forth. It can only happen in South Africa. Now, and that takes me to the last question of having lost 48 seats. I think we should do further analysis of the 48 seats that we have lost. How many we gained through floor crossing? Because if you don't factor that in, you will not appreciate the dynamics of that day, of that year. And you will also fail to appreciate the fact that despite the fact that we're the biggest beneficiary of floor crossing, we came out of the 52nd National Conference of the ANC and abolished floor crossing as unfair. And there's no floor crossing today. Everybody, if you cross the floor, you lose your seat. So I think in the analysis, factor those in and then come up with a more scientific analysis of what has happened. But it cannot be not a cause of concern to lose a seat in Parliament for any party. If we lose a seat in Parliament, we'll be concerned about losing that seat. So I regard that as more of a rhetoric question than an issue. But what is the net effect of that? With 62%, will we have a lesser impact in the governance? I don't think so. Particularly that it is all the other parties that want to make constitutional amendments. The ANC has not proposed any constitutional amendments in its campaign and in its manifesto. So you need 2/3 majority for amendment of the Constitution. Everything else requires simple majority. So in terms of the effectiveness of governance, it's more a psychological question of whether you drop so many seats or not, but losing a seat for any political party is an issue. And I think I must link that to the question of whether the emergence of new parties and the growth of other parties impact more on the ANC than wiping out the smaller parties. It's another analysis that should be done in the media. Our observation is that in 2009, the emergence of COPE weakened and wiped out a number of smaller parties. This time around, the emergence of EFF has wiped out a number of smaller parties and actually weakened many of them. You can list them. I listened to the last debate of the UDM and ACDP. The Honorable Reverend was expecting double digit. And somebody was asking, what is double digit? I said, 2 seats is double digit because it's double, it's 2. So that is the double digit he achieved. And you can look at all the smaller parties wiped out. Azapo is not in parliament. The PAC has just walked into another 1 seat again. APC 1 seat again. COPE 2 or 3 seats. 3 seats. And look at that. All the smaller parties battle in heavy contest of elections. The ANC, yes, we lose seats, but we still have 62 plus percent of the seats, which is not having any direct impact on the actual effective governance. But I must concede that when you lose seats as a political party, you get worried. It doesn't matter whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 10. Seats, when you lose seats, you begin to count your fortunes as a party. Drop in Gauteng. First of all, I think I must tell you that the chairperson of the ANC in Gauteng, Comrade Paul Mashatile, have phoned us and explained that the article in the City Press doesn't come from any structure in Gauteng. He took trouble of phoning and said, listen, that article we have read, it is not the position of Gauteng as a structure. Therefore, if individual talk to the City Press and the City Press go and print that, it's fine. It's what God Jackson called them, ghosts. It's the sources. We can't dissuade the media from using its sources. But the reality of the matter is that the worst thing that would happen to Gauteng as a province is to try to find scapegoat for the loss of support. Instead of going back to the drawing board, consolidate its support, and begin to appreciate that the opposition is not very much interested in taking over governance. It is more interested, for the moment, on economic centers. That's why they will focus on Gauteng, because it is an economic center. That's why they will focus on Cape Town, because it's an economic center. That's why in the Eastern Cape, they are not dreaming of ever taking over the Eastern Cape, that they are very keen to take over PE. And Gauteng must go back and do a detailed analysis of that reality and begin to develop a strategy of dealing with it. And that's it. Leave the scapegoating and dealing with that issue. And if you talk about the pressing issues, and then you begin to talk about e-tolls, for example, I think I will continue putting this argument on this matter, that it's a misplaced debate. It's an emotional debate. It doesn't talk to the world-class infrastructure in Gauteng. And that is the debate we should be having, whether we should continue investing on the world-class infrastructure in Gauteng, and how do we fund it and deal with that issue. There is no province in this country that has the kind of infrastructure that Gauteng is having. When I go to the Eastern Cape, where I was born, I always boast to them that I'm staying in Gauteng, my branch is in Boksburg. It's the only province where you jump in a bus in Soweto, connect Gautrain, and connect an aeroplane in the international airport. It doesn't happen anywhere else. That is the debate we should have, not only within ourselves, with the growing middle class in Gauteng. The black middle class is growing fast. It must appreciate that it is at the hub of the economy of the country. It has access to world-class infrastructure, and it must appreciate that it is better off in terms of development, and therefore appreciate that it should do things differently. And therefore, whether it is a pressing issue or not, it is a pressing issue because it has been made a narrow issue of e-tolls. And there is no debate about the world-class infrastructure in Gauteng. including world-class international airport in Gauteng, the OR Tambo International Airport. Modernized roads, modernized infrastructure, and the fact that we have a bus system that is beginning to work in Gauteng and it is assembled here. They are not imported as buses. Buses are assembled in this province. This province must internalize what that means for them. So I'm leaving that one. I've pulled together all the issues around this particular issue. The pressing issues, you see, pressing issues, where the pressing issues is service delivery. The unfortunate part of this theme, service delivery, is that when people protest because they want a municipality of their own, it is put in the same bag as people who protest for poor water supply and access to water and electricity. There is a theme called service delivery. I think it will be helpful for the media to begin break down protests. When people want a municipality of their own, when people want the removal of a mayor, or people fight because they want to remove a councillor, that is not service delivery. And I think that categorization is going to be important if we want to do proper analysis of protests and the trends in South Africa. When people throw statistics of service delivery, they will include Malamlela, Stack Sprayed. And you'll know that in those towns, the issue is whether they can be redemarcated, and be established as municipalities that are standalone municipalities. That is not service delivery per se. It's aspirations to be on your own, and underlying that would be a desire to appreciate the fact that allocation of seats in the leadership will be from a limited core of cadres instead of broad a municipality of Thulamela as opposed to Malamlela. Those issues will not be said openly, but they are underlying. So that's why I'm saying when you talk about those issues, whether we'll run for them, I don't think that is what should happen. What should happen is we should deal with the genuine concern of people in those areas and in other areas as well. And in other areas. That's why in our statement we talk of accelerating a delivery of services everywhere. And without even waiting for your question, that will apply to the question of housing. You know, we're beginning to revisit this question of putting pressure for housing by erecting informal settlements all over. And therefore government respond to informal settlement by allocating houses. Because in the campaign, what we've picked out, both in Soweto and other major townships, when we went to PE, we picked the same problem, that listen, we're not protesting, but we're in backyards of our old families. We're 3 families in the same yard. No attention is paid to us because we're not protesting, we're focusing on informal settlements. It's a challenge that has been thrown on us. We're going to have to focus on that and not only allow people to set informal settlement and put pressure on us in terms of service delivery. Service delivery and provision of housing should be in terms of the plan, target the right people to access houses. So it is not going to be focusing on hotspots and avoid them recurring. Hotspots will recur, it doesn't matter what you do. The more you do, the more you get them. I still argue that delivery of services trigger impatience and make people want to get more. Why is it delivered to this part of my town and it has not touched me? It makes that section very impatient. It's part of reality that we must deal with. The guidelines for deployment, there are no new guidelines for deployment. We always had guidelines for deployment. We always had guidelines for deployment. There's an effort to deploy people where they can best use their talent. And that will not change. And we'll continue doing that and deploy people where we think their talent can best be served and can be of service to our people. What do you mean by redoubling our efforts? Redoubling our efforts means working harder. That's all it means. It means working harder. We have 20 years of experience. We have all the reason and the basis to perform better, having that experience and knowing exactly what we should do. It's not like when you are new in government where you are setting things from scratch, you are setting system, you find available systems that do not fit your program, you have to readjust. We have no excuse after 20 years. We should actually do better. We have the experience, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise, we have grown the base, the intellectual base that government is fishing from. Therefore, we can have no reason not to improve in our previous performance. What do we mean by margins are softer? If you do an analysis in the run-up to any elections, I'm sharing this with you, and leave the IPSO and other things. When you do your own detailed analysis, you look into your base, which is solid, which is your actually a base that is reliable, that is strong on the ANC. You also look on the margins, which is people who are undecided. There are people who remain undecided until the last moments. People who say yes, when you ask them whether they will vote ANC, they give you an answer like, yeah, near. That is the soft margin that we're talking about. Those people who give you an answer, yeah, near, must be persuaded on an ongoing basis to say yeah and cut out the near. That is what we talk about, softer margins. And that's why we say that 62 remains a solid base, but we must work on the margins that continue shrinking all the time. We've answered the question of the hotspots. I'm going to leave the divisive election campaigning to Malus Kika. If there's any divisive campaigning, you are responsible for that, Malus. So you must answer that question. By the opposition, a divisive election campaign, how will we ensure that parties work together? I'm leaving that to you. How are we going to restore weak investor confidence? Now, the question is a little bit cynical. Let me tell you why. Because it creates an impression that dealing with investors is like opening and closing a tap of water. You open their confidence, you close it. You open your confidence, you close it. When actually investors make observations from outside and take decisions. I don't know, one of the things that we observed, as the results were being announced and the election were completed, the rand strengthened. It firmed up. Now, which means that one of the basic things that should be done to restore investor confidence has happened. Peaceful, what is the description? Free, fair, transparent, and credible elections have been held. That is one of the elements of restoring investor confidence. It has happened. The second thing that will happen is being clear on the policies of the ANC as we get into governance. That's why we put an emphasis on the NDP. That is a firm commitment that will guide our implementation over the next 5 years. Again, we're creating certainty. 3, once the cabinet is appointed and there is clear leadership in place, investors will look into that leadership, do their own analysis and say that we are serious about the leadership of the country and therefore investor confidence will be restored. You can't go to them and say, please be confident. You must do certain things, they will make their observation, and that confidence will be restored. I'm leaving the divisive campaigning to Malus, and I'm sure, Malus, you can add even on the other issues of the drop, of the support, and all those issues, and talk to any other issues you want to talk to.
Thank you, SG, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your questions. We ran a very furious campaign. I think, as our statement says, in the history of campaigning, this was big, very effective, and the volunteers of the ANC has delivered the ANC the resounding victory that we gained. And so the ANC can't win a whopping 62% of the vote and then start complaining about the other 38% that we didn't win. We got 11.4 million votes compared to the 10 million we got in 1994. Out of 18 million votes that were cast. That is resounding confidence. We would be ungrateful winners if we were to say to South Africans, instead of humbling ourselves before them and thanking them for the resounding support they gave us, no, but we are mourning about the other 38% that didn't vote for us, and we even hold an entire indaba on just how did we lose the other 38. We're not going to do that. We certainly will do our analysis of our performance in the campaign to analyze scientifically how we ran our campaign, to analyze the voting patterns, to look at the voting patterns VD by VD, to look at how the different social strata in South Africa voted, what were their issues during the campaign, and how should the ANC deal with those as we continue to attempt building social cohesion. So we must look at the voting patterns of the white community in South Africa. How did they vote? How did the black middle class vote? How did the black working class vote? How did the colored working class, the colored middle class, how did the different strata, social strata in our society vote? So that we can do proper analysis. We don't partake in elections as the ANC for the simplistic reason to win an election. We've got a program to implement, and that is why we put that program forward as we campaigned. And didn't have much time in our campaign to focus on the negative issues and focus on the opposition, because we had to mobilize and canvass and rally South Africans on the basis of the program and vision of the ANC. And that is what, in our opinion, won us the elections. I think, as the SG said earlier, the election results are a resounding vote of no confidence in the negative campaigning of the opposition. We are very grateful winners. We are humbled by the election results. South Africans trust the ANC. 62% of them gave the ANC their vote, and we are therefore not complaining at all. The campaign was very negative, and I think I read a statement by one journalist yesterday night, on Twitter, saying that the media must not be too defensive. They must concede where they are being genuinely criticized. You campaigned hard against the ANC and we beat you too. Yes. You stuck your necks out and asked people not to vote for the ANC, we defeated you. Does that mean we are going to have an acrimonious relationship after this? I don't think so. I think that what it means is that we have a robust democracy. We understand it. We know you've never loved us. Don't have a problem with that.
That's your man.
Yes. We don't have a problem with that. If the people of South Africa love the ANC and trust it, that is our only concern. And that is why our commitment is towards building this democracy, because we understand the responsibility placed on the shoulders of the ANC. The same will apply in how, elections are terrible. No, they're funny. Because it's one moment when we get to say all sorts of nice things about each other. In 2009, there were talks about snakes and this and that other animal, and people complained. But after that, we worked together. We have the National Development Plan. All political parties in Parliament have committed to it. There are new entrants now. We don't know whether they will also support it, but that is the program of action that has united the nation, and we are going to pursue it. We will not seek to try satisfy everyone. We are going to work as hard as we can to provide leadership to the whole nation, to take everybody on board along the same perspective, the framework of which is the NDP. And we will continue through the work of committees in Parliament, through the plenary sessions and various other fora, to reach out to the opposition and try to work together with them. I think that we've got a solid democracy as a country, very entrenched, and this election proved that. There were areas which had service delivery protests. But when elections came, in actual fact, in terms of social destabilization, these elections were much better than the ones in 1994, incomparably. In 1994, there were many serious problems, deaths and intimidation. In these elections, even in areas which were said where tents were torched, in areas which had service delivery or riots, areas which were said to be hotspots, come election day, people went out to vote. I think that spoke to the strength of our democracy, and for that, we thank the people of our country. I think finally, we are going to work hard. I think the investors know that the victory of the ANC means what? It means the continuity of the NDP. It means the continuity of the infrastructure rollout, the largest in the history of our country. It means the continuation with the implementation of the industrialization, the bold and ambitious industrialization program. We've already pronounced that 75% of all goods and services that the state will require will be sourced from local suppliers over the next coming years. This is not a 5-yearly program. We're changing the way we're doing business in the country. We're paying more attention to developing local supplier sectors and capabilities so that we can develop small businesses, industrialize the South African economy, create more decent and sustainable jobs, and keep the South African economy vibrant. And I think that is why, amongst others, you saw the strengthening of the exchange rate, of the foreign exchange rate, as the election results were trickling in, because there was now clarity as to the direction South Africa would take. It's actually amazing that the message which had been communicated or could have been communicated might have caused consternation amongst the investors. we never had doubt that we were going to win these elections. We knew that we would work hard. The biggest strength of the ANC is the sheer mass of the volunteers that we have. And I think that the victory of the ANC communicates a positive message to the international investors. Where we are going to now focus on improving on our build program, on our capital investments, and ensuring that we are on the good track with it. Thank you.
We beat you too. I agree fully. I would like to name some people who even went out to say, we as this newspaper are going to vote for this party. Yo, we will remember you. Can we continue? Ready? And your articles in that order. Brandon? Yes? I've noted them already. There are 5. Yes.
Thank you.
We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Ranjini from the Daily Maverick. With regard to the performance in Gauteng, is there going to be any intervention from the national leadership to deal with mediocre performance? I'm not going to say poor. And there has been some talk of a possible disbandment of the provincial leadership. Has that been considered at all? Secondly, at the victory celebrations last night, President Zuma said, and I quote, "There's nothing wrong with Nkandla, there's something wrong with them," referring to the opposition and the media. And he went on to say further, "I don't know why they should be angry at Nkandla, really." Is this the position of the ANC, that you don't think there was anything wrong with Nkandla? Thank you.
Next.
Marina Lamprecht from Beeld newspaper. Also linking to Ranjani's question, do you believe that Nkandla did cost the ANC votes in Gauteng, yes or no? And then also the ANC performed quite, yes.
Did Nkandla
My question is, do you
cost the
think
ANC vote
Nkandla...
in Gauteng?
Yes, exactly.
And Nkandla is in KZN. But continue.
Yes. And then also the ANC lost quite a bit of support, more than 10% in Tshwane and in the city of Johannesburg. Is that something the ANC is worried about for 2016, that you might get below 50% and lose those cities?
Yes, madam.
Thank you very much. Connie Tanja from the New Age newspaper. Just a follow-up question to Minister Gigaba. You spoke earlier about decisive campaigning from opposition, but have you witnessed any trends from some ANC structures, particularly the Gauteng ANC, running parallel campaigns, and if that was a worry at all for you? And sitting today, is there anything that you could have said or what to the electorate that would that you regret not saying or doing as part of your campaign? And just a third question at the FG, just more on how the ANC will elect its leadership for the different portfolios. Besides talent, what other guidelines? Because the electorate sort of signed a blank check to the ANC, giving it its support, but to any party. So with the majority of the country supporting the ANC, how will it be rest assured tonight or today that that vote for the ANC will actually result in competent leaders? Thank you.
Who was next? That gentleman over there? Yeah.
Thanks, Situmo again from Business Day. Baba SG, since the media is taking a little bit of a hammering today,
no.
perhaps you could assist us in doing our job.
You made this bed. Just lie in it.
Yes, I'm concerned about the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. Could you give us your analysis, something that we could use to explain to our readers what's happening in Nelson Mandela Bay from the perspective of the ANC? Thanks.
That will be the last round. Okay, this is the last round, so that today is Sunday. Some of us would still love to go to church. Yes, Bob.
Kamlesh from Bloomberg News. Minister Gigaba said that the investor know that the restoring of the ANC victory means that continuity of the NDP. So in terms of nomination of ministers, will it be continuity in terms of finance ministry, public enterprise, and will it be the same people because there are reports today?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Who has the constitutional duty to appoint ministers?
The presidency.
Oh, thank you very much. But continue.
Yeah, but that's why I was asking the question.
Oh.
Should we be expecting a review of ministerial positions? Thank you.
At least we have answered your question. Any other person who? Okay. Asiphenduleni bafowethu.
Okay, Malus, let me give you a chance. We are expected to appoint ministers, And I'm sure the first appointment will be appointing yourself, I'll
first appoint the president. Thank you. Just so that the SG can close up. Just to respond to the questions about, there was no parallel campaigning in Gauteng. None whatsoever. We ran the campaign. The ANC election machinery is very mean. It has one commander in this case, that was me, and everybody else takes instructions. And everybody, including the officials, took instructions and then they asked later. Now that the campaign is over, I'm expecting them to submit a list of questions. Why did you ask me to do this? Why did you ask me to go there? But during the campaign, nobody does anything that falls outside the ambit of what we tell them to do. So there was no parallel campaigning in Gauteng. We also adapt our campaign based on particular experiences, on local conditions, to try and deal with issues our surveys might be telling us are pertinent in those areas. And so there was no parallel campaigning in Gauteng. Do we have any regrets about what we might have said during the campaign? No. Everything we said during the campaign had to be said. ANC leaders during the campaign spoke about the manifesto of the ANC. There could have been instances, for example, when words were attributed to the deputy president, and we can defend that. Words attributed to me, speaking in Limpopo about if you vote for somebody, the past will come back. I can stand here and defend that. I will not regret it. Whatever the deputy president said in Seshego, we don't regret it. Everything we said during the campaign needed to be said. I think what confirms that it was effective was how everybody jumped when we said it. We were hitting the nerve, and a nerve that people didn't want us to talk about. So we have no regrets about anything we said during the campaign. We can defend it. I think my questions end there. Any other thing now belongs to my bosses.
Ranjan, I want to give you a friendly advice. As a journalist, never behave as an insider in the ANC. Because every time a journalist tries to behave as an insider in the ANC, you miss the point. I think this question of disbanding the PEC of Gauteng has been raised by the same people over and over and over and over and over. And I think they're disappointed that we have not disbanded it. By the way, the conference of the province of Gauteng is overdue. We stopped it because there were elections. After this election, we'll be going to a conference. How do you disband a province when it is due for conference and give it a lifeline of another 9 months? It's not done. It's not done. We'll go, that province is expected to go to conference immediately after the elections. So I don't know the question of going to disband it. Yeah, Malus. They're asking whether any planted a question, Pagoranjan. So, please. National intervention in Gauteng, yes, we'll deal with it. We'll have a discussion with Gauteng because it has not performed well. We'll deal with it. We'll have a meeting with the Western Cape. It has improved, but it has not improved as the outcome of that improvement is not equal to the input we put in there, the energy that was put there. We'll have a discussion about that. That is the essence of a post-mortem of any project. So the question, therefore, is in line with what should happen in any way after the election. The marginal decline in Limpopo and Mpumalanga, those are 80% provinces. They have now been at 78 and 79% respectively. We'll have to have a discussion with those provinces. So we'll have a post-mortem of the election campaign for all the provinces. Then Ranjani goes on to talk about